If this were a funeral procession, John would be the Holy One, Ringo the Undertaker, Paul, barefoot and out of step, the Dead Man, and George, the Gravedigger. And there in the background is a white car, a Beetle.
What significance, if any, do you attach to the parked Volkswagen with a registration plate on the back?
Well, the license plate says 28 if, and if Paul McCartney were alive today, he would be in his 28th year of existence.
In other words, he would be 27 looking toward his 28th
That's
birthday.
correct. That's correct.
Ask you to reverse the album and tell me whether or not you find anything on the rear of the album that to you is suspicious or appears to be deliberate.
Well, there are 3 dots in the wall up near the top that appear, if a line was drawn between them, it appears to make the number 3, so it would read 3 Beatles.
Would you connect them up as you suggest?
3 Beatles.
And you say that was intended to be a message that there are now alive only 3 Beatles? Your name, sir?
Alan Klein.
Do you represent these Beatles we've been talking about?
Yes, we do.
Do you recognize a 3 in front of the name Beatles in the back of the album made out by those dots?
Look at it.
Sure.
I wonder if you would do yourself a favor and get the album which was printed in England. That's a terrible short pack album. I'd like to help you.
Is that a bad album, man?
Is that a bad album?
Cover.
Defect on the cover?
Oh, the defect on the cover, the 3.
Fine, those
I really can't judge.
Okay.
I would like to see the original.
But I think Paul got very annoyed with it. He went away.
I don't try to.
2 weeks ago he was annoyed.
Do you think he's anxious to have these stories set to rest? Why has Paul McCartney not said, okay, look, here's Scotland Yard, they have my prints, here's my fingers, they say I'm the same guy, let's stop the nonsense. He hasn't done that.
Michael McGear, what do you think? You've heard all the clues. Is your brother Paul McCartney alive? First, I found it very embarrassing that you were just saying now. For the simple fact, it has no basis, no factual backing up. You've got nothing at all to base it on.
The way that America has responded to rumor of Paul McCartney's death.
But don't you see, it's a hoax, it's a con. When was the last time you saw your brother? The last time? Was his funeral. Was his funeral. Was his funeral. Was his funeral. Was his funeral.
Paul had died some while back. He had a jolly good impersonator working for him because I began to believe it myself. It was obvious that he's died and the boys are covering it up.
Following the rumors spread in October 1969, special magazines were printed and memorial records appeared on the radio.
At the end of Strawberry Fields, John says I buried Paul.
Brother Paul, I'm crying. Are you really lying?
So long, Paul. We hate to see
Had a different view. Hey there, Paul, what's new? Did Judas talk to you, or did you put the whole world on?
St. Paul, performed by Detroit singer Terry Knight, was the most famous Paul is Dead song. In May 1969, 5 months before the rumors started spreading, the song was released in Detroit already. The record label states that the song was published by Macklin Music. That's John Lennon and Paul McCartney's publishing firm. St. Paul would turn out to be the only non-Beatles song ever published in their catalog.
What is your name, sir?
Sal Lannicci.
Where do you live?
Los Angeles.
By whom you employed?
Capitol Records.
Is that the same Capitol Record company that publishes the Beatles albums?
That's right.
And in what capacity are you employed?
I'm president of Capitol Records.
What do you know about Paul McCartney being dead?
I've heard a lot of talk and I've read about it, but...
You say that you've had no increase in sales, felt no effect from all of this publicity?
We've noticed some increase recently in the number of...
A sharp increase?
It would be substantial over what would be expected, but I'm sure that it's caused in part by the discussion and the conjecture as to whether McCartney.
Would you, as president of Capitol Records, participate in a hoax of this sort in order to increase sales?
No, I don't think we'd engage.
Right, and do you say that none has been perpetrated to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
In April 1970, Paul released his first solo album. They say life is a bowl of cherries, and the album cover shows a spilled bowl of cherries. The documentary film and album Let It Be were released. On the album cover, all the Beatles' photos have white backgrounds, except Paul. Paul's background is blood red. Originally, the cover photos were in black and white.
This is roll 29, slate 23, 27.
The only people like who need to agree on what it is we're doing. The last album.
The last album.
Yes. Or else I really feel like I'm trying to produce the Beatles, and I know it's hopeless. I just can't do it. But it's going to be such an incredible thing, like in 50 years' time, you know. They broke up because Yoko sat on an amp. You see, John kept bringing this girl along.
There was very few things that happened to Beatles that weren't really well thought out by us whether to do it or not. And, you know, what reaction, and would it last forever?
Sir, what is your name?
Peter Asher.
And do you know Paul McCartney, Mr. Asher?
Yes, I do. I've known him well for about 5 years.
And so you've known a man who calls himself Paul McCartney both before and after November 1966?
Yes, I've known both of them. I think the clues are a mixture of coincidence. They're a mixture of things that are on the records and that if you listen to in a certain way could be interpreted in this light in order to suggest that Paul is dead.
What about I Buried Paul? Is it there?
It sounds like it is to me, yes. It sounds like John is saying I buried Paul.
Yes.
Yes.
This is actually a Beatle wife fixing the tea for one of the Fab Four ex-Beatles.
Fab 3.
Fab 3.
Fab 3.
Fab 3.
Those freaks was right when they said you was dead.
And I was answering a few little messages that Paul sent to me on RAM, you see.
On his second solo album, Ram, are the initials Lily. And almost 40 years later, in Paul's The McCartney Years release,
Let's have little hidden things for fans.
Those freaks was right when they said you was dead.
Last year, we had a big thing about Paul McCartney being dead.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how much of it was planned and how much was planned by you.
It had nothing to do with me. There is a rumor that he is dead, actually, but the first I heard about it was in the press, you know, or from those. I don't know how it happened. It's a mystery to Paul. It was a mystery to me. None of us knew what it was about or whatever. But of course, they credited to me or Paul, saying, you know, that it was publicity seeking, and we did it. It was too far out for us to have thought of it, you know. And it wasn't a very, I don't know, it was a peculiar thing. I don't know what it was about.
McCartney created Wings.
Small gathering on Savile Row is only the beginning. The event is so momentous that historians may one day view it as a landmark in the decline of the British Empire. The Beatles are breaking up.
Percy Thrillington is one of a handful of albums Paul recorded without using the McCartney name and fame. The name of the imposter is rumored to be Bill, short of William. There's evidence that Paul McCartney called himself Billy Martin, but he referred to himself by lots of aliases: Apollo C., Vermouth, Bernard Webb, Clint Hammigan, Percy Thrillington, the Fireman, Ian Iacamo. Bill seems to return, though. Why were the Beatles originally considering naming the Abbey Road album Billy's Left Boot? Why did Paul invent the name Billy Shares on the Sgt. Pepper album? Why did Paul design a hidden message, Bill, on the DVD release The Space Within Us? Why was Paul introduced as William in the control room scene of his autobiographical motion picture, Give My Regards to Broad Street?
You know, William. Oh, great. Wonderful, you fellow. You know, William. Oh, great. Wonderful, you fellow. You know, William. You know, William.
There were four of us in that band, and it just seems to be George and I, Yoko, Sean, and Julian here.
We all know why John can't be here, and I'm sure he would be, and it's hard really to stand here supposedly representing the Beatles. It's what's left, I'm afraid. But we all loved him so much, and we all love Paul very much.
The Fireman, another secret project. When the Beatles' Anthology 1 was released in November 1995, the Beatles produced a new song, Free as a Bird.
On Free as a Bird, if you listen to the end of it, you've got a little backwards bit that we put in, which was actually a little phrase when you turn it round, and it was like a little Beatle clue, you know. What was it? Listen to it actually backwards. John says, ha, made for John Lennon.
Anthology 2 was ready for release in February 1996. 2.5 million copies were loaded onto trucks and were about to leave the factory, heading for the stores. Paul McCartney demanded they change direction at the last minute. Instead of heading to the stores, they were returned, and all of them burned. Paul paid $12 million to have them destroyed. The official explanation was that two songs had to change place.